Welcome back to the news channel of Nghe An Newspaper and radio and television on YouTube platform. Here, we share and interact with the hottest and newest issues that the public at home and abroad is interested in. And here are some notable contents.
On September 10th, Russia stated that Poland had not yet provided any evidence that the UAV drones were shot down in Poland from Russia. The Anko News class led Andrzej Otis, Russia's contemporary audience in Poland. We view these charges as baseless, and there's no evidence that these drones are Russian-based. On the same day, Prime Minister Donat said that the country recorded its 19 subterraneans during the night, in which much of the UAV flew from the direction of Cordoba. Mr. TPD to the Congress, we now confirm that 3 UAVs have been sold. We have no information to show that anyone was hurt or killed by Russian action. Shooting down these UAVs that were supposed to threaten security changed the political situation. /r/in/do. The interviews with the Allies were raised into an official request to activate the DAD of the NATO treaty. According to DW, the fourth thing of the NATO treaty applies in the case that a member nation feels threatened by another country or by a terrorist organization. In consultations, the parties will consider whether the threat really exists and will discuss how to respond. The fourth, however, does not mean that NATO will take direct action or pressure to act. This interrogation mechanism has been activated several times in the history of NATO. For example, the Turkey used to guide the fourth point when this country's veterans died in an attack from Syria. At the time, NATO was conducting counseling but did not perform any military action. On the same 10th of the month, the Dutch Prime Minister Dick Scholl informed the Dutch Air Force to assist in shooting down the Russian UAV in the sky in Poland. Mr. Scholl said that the Russian UAV invasion of Poland was a measure of Russian war that posed a threat to European security. Recently, according to Tonepret, the Ukrainian president's advice on the policy of punishment against Licinius Vlu stated that Russian missile attack on the 10th of the month to the cabinet building in the capital of Kiev used the Iskander-9 M177 rocket. Interestingly, inside this fire money contains more than 30 foreign-made components including parts from the US, Britain, Japan, and Switzerland, despite orders to punish Moscow. In the ongoing Russian war scene, Moscow was still at the end of a drone strike and daily missile strike. The analysis from the debris and the explosion weapons for Russia still depend a lot on foreign production materials in the creation of the UAV rocket. The Great confirms that the U.S. cabinet building was hit by the Iskander-9 M177 rocket, but the warheads did not explode much because of the damage caused by burning fuels that caused fire on the roofs of a building in the same type that was previously checked by the U.S. cabinets, also found 35 parts produced in the U.S. in the year from 18th and 57 Russian parts of the same. British and Swiss production of various parts of Britain, such as the same number of parts of Britain and D.C. In comparison with the type of rockets that were previously analyzed, the number of parts that came from the US and Europe in Russia's Iskander has dropped. While conditions produced by the Russians and Varus rise, the entire investigation has been passed to international partners to promote further punishment. In an interview program on September 8th, Mr. Aristinsky told All Due Respect for the building that the building was built in the late 1930s with its long walls, Iskander, even if it didn't blow up so much. Therefore, it is difficult for the Russians to choose such a goal.
Mission Officer 12 Azov of the Ukrainian Army Alexander Aronet recently reported that Russia is deploying first-person flight equipment, the UAV FPV, which is 50 kilometers away from the front line. They seem to have been deployed from the UAV mother to penetrate the rear. Brother Atkins adds that Ukrainian vehicles were attacked by the UAV FPV Russia on a route from Izium to Slavian for days at a time. It is about 59 square kilometers, a population of over 105,000 people before the war. The city is quietly on the road from KP to Don's province, which is likened to the spine of the Ukrainian line of the Gramatok, Deriskopka, and Fresnopka. /r/Arnet said we should set up the UAV grid on these front lines as well as take the measures that the Ukrainian soldiers proposed. The Ukrainian army needs to act or Russia will soon control all Gramatok Slovian, Ruska and Kashinovka. Some Ukrainian military experts have admitted that this is the worst news in the past because the road through Izium is a subservient of Ukrainian blood in the region. The recovery and development of the Shire of Ka Jacob state that the rising competition and the opponent must deploy the UAV FPV makes the M03 highway from Izium to Slavian especially dangerous. We urge the driver to consider the situation as he plans for the trip, to avoid the upper stage if possible. To cope with the Russian UAV, Ukrainian soldiers recently lined up fishing routes to the front lines in Donetsk County. Similarly, the Russian military has been working on this plan since 2023. According to Western experts, the Russian military advanced ahead in the UAV development operations that forced the Ukrainians to take measures that were once considered less effective. According to TIN-TASS, the Russian Pacific Fleet recently reported that one of the Russian nuclear submarines had just completed a 3-month development in the Pacific area. In particular, the missile submarine Project 955A Emperor Alexander Tam completed the missions in the fleet's responsibilities and returned to the main base of the Kamchatka Peninsula in the Far East. After a standard rest and supplies, the crew will resume military training as planned. According to the Union of U.S. Scientists on Russia's Nuclear Weapons, every Bulava missile can carry 6 warheads, but this number may have dropped to 4 to match the limits of the New START Treaty on the number of strategic nuclear warheads. During the ship's programming ceremony in 2023, Russian President Vladimir Putin called this submarine a ship that carried no rival missiles in the same category, asserting that it would secure national security through strategic missions. And INGT, surf tests on the sea and a test of ballistic missiles, Emperor Alexander Tam made the journey to cross the Arctic Ocean to deliver from the North Ocean Fleet to the Pacific Fleet. The ship arrived at the main base in September 2370, with the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. By the number of warheads, Russia ran 12 nuclear missiles on missions to hunt and launch nuclear missiles when ordered. The Syat Podonska factory specializes in building the machine of Russian Rosatom Nuclear Energy has just completed the test of the RIM 400 reaction to the world's most powerful nuclear ice ship called Russia. /r/N with this ability, the Rosia nuclear ice ship can travel around the year in the eastern part of the North Sea Road and will promote the development of the Arctic region of Russia. According to Director J. Podonska, Igor Kotop, the factory provides reactor equipment for all of Russia's latest nuclear ice crews. Podonska now completes the RIM 400 reactor for the Rosia nuclear ice ship and the world's most powerful ship. According to Kutop, if you count both the giant RIM 400 reactors, Podonska built a total of 12 RLM reactors. RLM 400 is the heart of a Russian nuclear ice ship. According to Anton Kaberger, director of Podonska's factory, this is a version of RIM 200 improvement with steam generators placed inside the hull that allow for significant reduction in the size and weight of the device. Mr. Lev Bet made it clear that in the ship's construction industry these are the two most important parameters and that no country has ever done anything but Russia. Earlier this May, Russia completed the first 400-foot RIM team for breaking Russia nuclear tape. /r/r/r/r/ lection will allow Russia to soon go into action with the possibility of breaking ice over 4 meters and moving around the year on the north coast, asserting the leading position of Russia in this field.
In the context of trying to squeeze the economic siege around Moscow, the European Union, FOXO can impose punishment measures on China for continuing to buy oil and gas from Russia. Financial Times sources say that the first discussions on the possibility of imposing a level punishment have been started at Brooklyn on 7 months. However, an official of EBNA acknowledged the early stages of negotiations and emphasized that Brooke needed full consent from the U.S. before making a final decision. In search of unity, the FAO team arrived in Washington on the 8th of the month. But U.S. Department of Energy, Chris White, expected to come to Brooklyn this weekend to continue discussing policy coordination. The positive exchange of both European and American parties suggests that both Europe and the United States wanted to give a strong signal to China in the context of the Ukrainian conflict going on for the 4th year after the outbreak of the Ukrainian war in 2022. China quickly rose to become Russia's largest mining client. Instead of many Western partners, they withdrew because of the punishment packages. Beijing has always claimed that importing Russian oil is consistent with the need for economic growth and non-police. However, Western countries are increasingly concerned that the flow of energy trade is helping Moscow to maintain financial strategies for war. Earlier this year, JAGI used to punish some Chinese businesses with fish committed to support the Russian defense industry. At that time, Beijing reacted harshly, criticized the OF for applying its double standards and asserting China's strict management of its multi-use goods. /r/r/b/e Bibles repeatedly emphasized that they did not provide lethal weapons for any party related to the Ukrainian conflict. Beijing also has a strong point of view that will ensure energy security in every way possible in order to protect its national interests. Chinese officials warned that commercial warfare has no winners and that it shows concern that punishment measures can break the global supply of bananas. On the contrary, Moscow tries to take advantage of Asian economies. On a 4-day visit to China last week, the Russian President Vladimir Putin criticized the West for his unacceptable tone in terms of negotiating with economic powers like China or India. According to KFIRSD, Ukrainian HUR military intelligence recently shared the footage that showed that the country's forces were targeting 2 Russian air-room radar stations in Qom. In particular, they claimed to have hit a 48, a 6K1 radar, and a RLMIM module from the 55 hours 6 minutes Nebor. Thus, when Russian personnel were leaving their assignment, Ukrainian drones attacked. The Potlet system was designed to detect planes, helicopters, and drones flying near the ground. /r/r/in, while the Nebomir complex can track the missile and the target increases the image. The Ukrainian Military Intelligence Agency does not specify the more detailed location of the attack. Meanwhile, Tikbos also referred to the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Agency, which caused numerous explosions in the cities of Penza and Saratov in Russia. In particular, At least 4 explosions took place in Benz's Jelendarni district about 4 a.m. on the 8th of September local time, damaging 2 main air pipelines with a total capacity of up to 2 million barrels a day. The U.S. Military Intelligence Agency said that damaged pipelines provided fuel for military sites that the Russians used in the conflict with Ukraine. In addition, at about 1 a.m. on the 8th of the local September, another attack caused a massive explosion in the main pipeline of Lesop-Licha district, Saratov, Russia. This oil pipeline has an annual capacity of 82 million tons that are said to also fuel the Russian military's use in the conflict. Local social network accounts say that workers have been deployed to the scene in the morning to repair damages. According to Ukraine, this is the third oil infrastructure in Russia disabled within 24 hours. The warriors of the U.S. presidential bodyguards of the Ukrainian armed forces recently shot down a Russian rocket named Iskanka with a peace force to break down the Zu-232. The brigade's press office also posted a video on social media that showed that the missile was shot down during a Russian air raid on the night of July 7th to 8th months in the capital city of Ukraine. Russian aerial target attack was made by soldiers from the missile battalion and the cruise air artillery. The military forces emphasized that shooting down the Iskanka rocket with a Z-232 air cannon is a great fortune multiplied by a great skill. Z-232 is the Sovietly designed 23 mm size air artillery. It can be used to remove the aerial targets at a range of up to 2,500 meters and up to 2,000 meters. /MSO is armed with 23 mm bullets that are tied up with blasting warheads and transtracted armor warheads that set the line on fire. The Ukrainian armed forces used such weapons to shoot down the UAVs, attacking their father by 136 and Russian drones. These are targets that can be completely convexed by slow speed and low altitudes that are very easy to intercept if you can identify the distance flight path.
In the long-term conflict context, the Ukrainians are pushing ahead to attack Russia's energy facilities more than ever to cripple part of Moscow's economic artery. This strategy is also military, political, and external calculations. As a result, targeting in energy became a method of industrial warfare. Instead of focusing solely on direct competition, the Ukrainians tried to weaken the rear, which provided fuel and energy for the enemy's military operations. In August alone this year, more than 10 oil refineries and Russian warehouses have been shot at by kiosk forces, including facilities in Krasnodar and Zyran that played a significant role in the Russian fuel supply chain. In the first 8 months of the year, the revenues amounted to only $7.5 billion, forcing the Russian Ministry of Finance to reduce year by $102.8 billion. However, the observation world has determined to achieve long-term goals and efficiency. The Ukrainian campaign depends also on the ability to maintain new attacks, the accuracy of accuracy, and the control of the widespread impact. One of the incentives for pressurizing campaigns is the relative weakness of the Russian air defense system. After a long time dealing with the strike, the cost of defense missiles is not as high as the ability to produce supplements, the need to distribute forces in many areas also makes some targets in the rear less secure areas as well. The technological advances in the UAV drone have enabled Ukraine to take advantage of its opportunities. This opens up for pressing tactical windows during the current period. However, the picture isn't one-dimensional. The Russians are pushing oil cooperation with China to compensate for exports, while Europe is still partly dependent on alternative energy that is at risk of rising prices when winter comes. In addition to military and economic aspects, the attack on energy carries a diplomatic message by proving its ability to attack and its vital objectives. Kiev sends a signal that Moscow cannot be safe even behind the scenes. This was both to strengthen the spirit of the country and to increase the political pressure of Russia. However, crossing the border has made matters complicated. Some of the European countries, especially the Middle East and Eastern Europe, can be a source of interrupted energy that can affect differences within the European Union about how to treat both Russia and Ukraine. To avoid losing their support, KF leaders actively campaigned to meet European politicians in order to explain and reassure strategy. In short, many Western countries have remained committed to aiding Ukrainians, but in terms of term, if the energy or economic benefits of Europe are seriously affected, the risk of developing divisions is to exist. The attack on the Russian energy floor reflects an adjustment of Ukrainian strategy after the heavy losses on the front lines. In fact, the front lines on the grave are getting harder and the military forces are being spent. K has been forced to find a way to shift the focus to an involuntary exchange, where long-range attacks can produce greater impact than the cost. This was not only a way to compensate for the disadvantages of the front line but also an effort to maintain a strategic initiative in the context of the conflict that lasted until the fourth year. For Ukraine, focusing on energy goals brings three key benefits. Second, this strategy creates psychological and political impacts, sending the message that KF is still able to reach out and exert direct pressure on the enemy's economic failings. However, the stability of this strategy presents many challenges. To maintain the frequency of the attack, when you force the UAV supply and the intelligence system to stabilize the US forces can't be guaranteed without external relief support. Meanwhile, the Russians are strengthening their rooms, which means that the risk and cost rate of every Ukrainian attack will be higher and higher. If the Ukrainians can maintain the intensity of the attack, they will increase the strategic pressure, force Russia to spread its resources and face the indirect damage. If the Russian defense is elevated, the campaign is likely to slow down and make KF's strategic advantage difficult to turn into a strategic advantage. It's an effort to open up another front where KF hopes to turn the UAV advantage and international support into 7 strategies. This strategy, however, is both an opportunity and a house. Its success depends on the ability to maintain the intensity of the attack as well as the extent of the bond and tenacity of the West in continuing to provide technology in need. Miscalculations will result in an incredible lesson. The Russians have responded strongly in battle as a warning signal for wrongdoing. Amid escalating tensions with Venezuela, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told sailors and Marines on a warship off the coast of Puerto Rico that they were not being deployed to the Caribbean for training but were instead being sent to the front lines of a major counter-narcotics mission, UK News agency Reuters reported that Hegseth's remarks came during a surprise visit with the U.S. military's top commander to Puerto Rico on May 8 amid escalating tensions with Venezuela, the Trump administration has accused Caracat of smuggling drugs into the U.S., an accusation Venezuela has denied, even suggesting that the U.S. is escalating the situation in the region not because of drug trafficking but because of Venezuela's energy reserves. Speaking on RT on May 9, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro stressed that they need oil first, not drugs, but oil and gas, also said that Venezuela has the 4th largest gas reserves in the world, distributed throughout the Caribbean, and that is why Washington sent warships there. The Venezuelan leader also said that the U.S. military presence in Colombia does not bring victory over drug trafficking but only changes smuggling routes. He also accused the U.S. of trying to smear Venezuela and its leadership to launch an attack. Meanwhile, a video posted by the Pentagon on X shows Mr. HSE declaring on the deck of the amphibious assault ship USS Iwo, "What you are doing right now is not training. This is a real mission to protect the vital national interests of the United States of America to stop the poisoning of the American people," as President Donald Trump has ordered the Department of Defense to be renamed the Department of War, a change that will require congressional action. The new name will also apply to Mr. Hegseth, changing his title to Secretary of War. The USS Yoshima is deployed off Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory north of Venezuela in the Caribbean, where Hexet and Danon, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, visited earlier in the day. Puerto Rico Governor Jennifer Gonzalez, a Republican, welcomed them to the island and wrote on X, "We thank Putin and his administration for recognizing Puerto Rico's strategic value to U.S. national security and the fight against drug cartels in our region." On August 8, Venezuelan Vice President Dani Rodri West cited data she said showed Venezuela does not produce cocaine. And the drug is mostly smuggled through Pacific routes, saying how can they call it a drug cartel when there is no cocaine? They need to adjust their GPS. In its 2023 Global Cocaine Report, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime said the Pacific Ocean is a larger maritime cocaine route than the Caribbean.
The case of DeCarlos Brown Jr., 34, accused of murdering Ukrainian citizen Irina Zarushka on a Charlotte, North Carolina, subway train on May 22, has become a political flashpoint in the United States. On May 9th, U.S. Attorney General Pony announced that the Department of Justice would prosecute the killer of the Ukrainian refugee girl at the federal level and said it would ask the court to impose the maximum sentence. She said, "I have instructed the attorneys of the Federal Prosecution Agency to prosecute DeCarlos Brown Jr., who has a long history of violent crimes. We will ask for the maximum sentence for this violent act. The killer will never see the light of day as a free man.ms." Bonnie said that the passing of Zarushka, a young woman who was living the American dream, is a direct result of policies that are soft on crime and favor criminals over innocent people in some cities. The U.S. Justice Department said Brown was charged with a federal crime of causing death on public transportation, which carries a maximum penalty of life in prison or the death penalty. North Carolina prosecutors also charged Brown with first-degree murder. Criminal cases in the U.S. are usually handled by local prosecutors based on state and local criminal laws, while federal prosecutions only apply to violations of federal law. Surveillance video that went viral on social media on March 22 shows Brown watching the victim get on the train and sit in the row in front of him. He took a weapon from his pocket and killed the victim. All of this happened within minutes, even though the two had no interaction. Attorney Tuong, who represented Brown in a previous case, revealed that he had a long history of mental health issues. The shocking case has sparked political debate about crime and public safety policies. President Trump has accused Democratic-led cities, including Charlotte, of being too soft on street crime. In a post on social media site Choose Socialo on May 8th, he criticized Zarushka's blood on the hands of the Democratic Party. White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt noted that Prow had a long criminal record, including an armed robbery that landed him in prison for 5 years. Leavitt said this monster should have been locked up and Irina would still be alive. But Democratic politicians, left-wing judges, and incompetent prosecutors chose to burnish their image over protecting the community.
On September 9th, Nepal's army chief, General Azop Graken, called on protesters in the country to seek peaceful solutions through dialogue. The statement was made as the Nepalese army began to be deployed to maintain order throughout the country. In his speech, General Graken began by expressing deep sorrow over the damage to public property during nationwide protests and extended condolences to the families of those who died. He wished for the speedy recovery of those injured, calming the current unrest, protecting national heritage, public and private property, ordinary citizens, and diplomatic missions to bring a sense of security to the people and protect their maximum interests is a common task to lead the country out of this difficult situation through peaceful means. The Nepalese army chief requested the protest groups to cancel their protest plans and called for negotiations. At the end of his speech, General Graken called on all citizens to uphold the spirit of patriotism, social cooperation, and unity to move forward together. Just minutes after the Chief of Staff's statement, the Nepalese army announced that they would deploy troops along with other security agencies if looting, arson, and vandalism continued. A statement issued by the Public Relations Directorate of the Nepalese Army clarified that some groups are exploiting the crisis to cause serious damage to civilians and public property by engaging in looting and arson. The agency called on the public to exercise restraint and assist in preventing further destruction. The warning came after state agencies, including the government office complex of Sindhuba, the Supreme Court headquarters, and the Nepalese Parliament building in the capital Kathmandu, were set on fire on September 9. Attacks on political leaders, police, and public infrastructure have plunged this South Asian nation into an emergency state of chaos. Protesters have demanded an end to corruption within the government apparatus and unfair, biased policies that have been institutionalized in governance. The Nepalese army warned that security would be tightened if acts of looting and arson following the protests continued to recur. They want the government to be more accountable and transparent in its decision-making processes. Protesters also demanded the lifting of the ban on social media platforms, an action they consider an attempt to suppress freedom of speech. Recently, the Nepo babies trend on social media in Nepal has exposed the lavish lifestyles of the children of old politicians, highlighting the clear disparity in income and economic conditions between them and ordinary citizens. This movement targets the children of officials who are sent abroad for study by their parents and frequently flaunt luxury brands and lavish lifestyles online, in contrast to the difficult situation of young people struggling to find jobs in the country. A Nepalese person expressed on Reddit, "Those rich kids know exactly where their parents' money comes from the people's taxes. While we struggle to live, those kids enjoy privileges no one else has, and even show off on social media." This has fueled public resentment over corruption, nepotism, and economic inequality. This is the root cause that ignited the anger of the Nepalese people over the past 2 days. Meanwhile, in his first message since neighboring Nepal began to fall into violent protests on August 8, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called on protesters in Nepal to remain calm and support restraint amid the current chaos, in a post on social media platform X on the evening of September 9. The Indian Prime Minister called the violent situation in Nepal heartbreaking. He also stated that the stability, peace, and prosperity of this neighboring Himalayan nation are extremely important for India. In this message, the Indian leader expressed deep sorrow over the escalating violence in Nepal, which killed 19 people and forced Prime Minister Kap Samaili to resign. On May 9, immediately after completing his inspection tour of flood-affected areas in the northern states of Punjab and Himachal Pradesh, he immediately chaired a meeting of the Cabinet Committee on Security to discuss developments in neighboring Nepal, a nation of 30 million people in the Himalayas, transitioned from a monarchy to a republic in 2008 after a prolonged civil war. However, since then, the country's politics have been constantly volatile, with more than 10 governments formed, leading to a bleak economy. Nepal relies heavily on tourism, a sector boosted by social media promotional campaigns. Therefore, the government's ban on social media is considered a heavy blow to the people's important source of income. Poverty and high unemployment rates in the country have prompted many young Nepalis to enlist in the Russian army to fight in Ukraine. In 2023, Nepal's Ministry of Foreign Affairs requested Russia to stop recruiting its citizens and repatriate soldiers killed in Ukraine. When participating in a protest mentioning Nepalis killed in Ukraine, a young man expressed, "While officials' children return with suitcases, ordinary people's children return in coffins." A protester told Reuters, "All Nepali citizens are fed up with corruption, and every young person wants to go abroad to find work. So, we want to protect our youth and make the country's economy better."
On May 9, local sources in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo reported that militants linked to the Islamic State carried out 2 attacks the night before in North Kivu province, killing nearly 80 people. According to local officials, the militant group known as the Allied Democratic Forces (ADF), which is affiliated with IS, carried out an attack in the town of Toyo in North Kivu province, killing at least 60 people. Meanwhile, an NGO leader reported a second ADF attack in the Beni area, also in North Kivu province, killing at least 18 people. The militant group has carried out a series of deadly attacks this year. In late July, they attacked a Catholic church, killing more than 40 people and kidnapping more than 10 others. In another attack in August, the group killed 52 people, carried out kidnappings, looting, burning houses, and destroying other property. The eastern DRC is home to more than 100 rebel groups, and is also the site of a larger conflict between the DRC army and the M23 rebel group.